There we go. All right. Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, Facebook land and YouTube land and IGTV. I'm really happy to be able to be here. And so, okay, deep breath. We've had a lot of major changes and major ups and downs this week. Lots of news about coronavirus and the death tolls and people getting sick and in hospitals. And I've certainly seen it in my circle of friends and my circle of colleagues. And I wanted to address this because I think it's a really scary thing for so many of us to be dealing with illness and this disease that is still feels so nebulous to so many. And I see friends who are dealing with loss, and it's coming faster and faster, or at least it's coming more often than we're used to dealing with this kind of loss on a regular basis. And it's important to me to serve you in the ways that you need and that are useful to you. So I thought today we would talk a little bit about the elements of grief and how to conduct yourself as a leader when dealing with your own sense of loss and grief, and also helping those who you are leading contend with some of this grief and loss. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's not an easy topic, but I wanted to make sure that we got to hold space for some of this. So we're going to talk first about the impact of grief and loss on our lives, in our daily life, and in our work. We're going to talk about ways to handle it, both within ourselves and with the people that we lead and take care of. And we're going to talk about the lasting change that's going to occur because of this grief and loss. Those are the three topics we're going to be, components that I'm going to be addressing today. And if you have any questions or want to throw in a thought or a piece of wisdom that you want to drop or a connection that you want to make, go ahead and leave that in the comments as well. I'd be happy to connect with you. In fact, if you're out there, please go ahead and put in the comments how you're doing. Drop an emoji on how you're doing. I would love to see, just kind of take a status check on how everybody is feeling today. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is this impact that grief and loss have on us in the first phase of it. That is to say, we hear the news of something that is difficult. We hear that we've lost somebody or that we're worried about somebody. Thanks, Jonathan. I see some silly face there too. Thanks, Jonathan, for that. I'm glad you're feeling a little bit silly. And that's great too, because one thing to know about grief is that it's not linear. You know, we hear a fair amount about the stages of grief. It's not linear. It's not something that we go through and then all of a sudden we're through it. It's something that impacts us in all kinds of ways at the moments we least expect it, and whether we're ready for it or not. And it's okay to laugh in the throes of grief. It's okay to laugh when you're dealing with loss. It's okay to smile and be happy and find joy in the little moments. In fact, it's really important to do that. I wrote an article a few years ago for a blog called Lipstick and Politics. And the first line of the article is, "Grief will hijack you," or I think grief can hijack you. That resonated for a lot of people. I think it resonated because it is this feeling of, it's overwhelming. When we have a loss that we're confronting in our life, we're not totally privy to how it will impact us, especially if it's closer to home than it ever has been before, or if it feels totally out of our control, like it probably does feel right now for those of you dealing with loss from COVID and fear for friends who are dealing with COVID. Because we can't connect in the same way that we usually do. We aren't given the space, the physical space, to connect with each other the way we typically do or are. And that impact is something that we'd like sometimes to skip over. I remember when I was dealing with my own grief, I had 3 major losses right in a row. In 1 year, I was already contending with the diagnosis of my husband, Peter, as he was going through his brain cancer treatment, and the odds were definitely stacked against him there. The diagnosis came in April of 2011. On the heels of that, we lost my dad in January of 2012. And then we lost Peter in April of 2012. And then just 3 or 4 weeks after that, my grandfather passed away, who was a giant in my life. And in many ways he was the patriarch of the family on my mother's side. So there was an enormous amount of loss all right in a row. It was quite the year. And I remember walking up to my front stairs the day I heard my grandfather passed away. So after my father and then my husband. And I had 3 little kids who were demanding my time, of course. And I texted my friend Maria and I said, I can't breathe. I can't physically get myself to go into the house. I can't do it. Like, I'm stuck in my driveway. Can you please come help? Because I can't move anymore. And thank God she came over and helped me in the house and helped take care of the kids and kind of put me to bed for a little while, because it just knocked me out. Grief will hijack you. And in particular, it will hijack you if you think it won't. I was in a phase where I didn't think I needed the help or wanted the help. I thought I could outsmart it. I thought I could outwork it. I thought I could outthink the grief. I was wrong. The only way out of this is through it. And there are reasons for this. We attach ourselves to the energy of other people and the love that we feel for other people and the love they feel for us. It will not skip over you. You cannot outthink it. You cannot outrun it. And I see my sister Holly is on today. Hi, Holly. Yeah, so she was taking care of our dad when this all happened, and so she was right there with we were there together during all of this. And she's also experienced her own loss and more recently. So it's palpable. The brain gets scrambled, like neurologically. There is something that happens to us when we're dealing with loss. I'm not a neurologist and I'm not a mental health specialist. I want to make sure I'm saying that out loud. I'm speaking from my own experience and from the wisdom I've gained through that experience, and also from a coaching perspective. The hijack comes partly from feeling threatened, feeling isolated, and that feels scary and it feels unsafe. And so the brain then goes through all the gymnastics it needs to go through to help us feel safe. And when it can't feel safe, it sort of loses it. It feels like there's no safe place. And so the panic buttons get hit. I had a friend who was widowed just about a year before I was. And she was incredibly helpful to me and we were a great support to each other when all that happened. She reported to me that it feels like being a worm on a hook. Like you are just writhing there in the wind and you are in the most incredible critical pain and everybody is out there watching. And there's nothing you can do about it. You're completely powerless. My sister Holly just said it makes you paint your entire house by yourself, which is what she's doing right now. She's painting her entire house by herself. So there's some good things that come out of it, right? It can spur us to feel productive too. I want to tell you something really important about grief. I mentioned earlier, number one, their only way out is through. And number two, there is a way through it. There is relief that will come by going through it. I can relate firsthand to the feeling of, oh my gosh, if I open the floodgates to this grief, it's going to consume me and I will never be able to get out of it. And it wasn't until I really got knocked on my ass, pardon my French, where I could not sustain it anymore on my own, that I finally started to allow myself to go through it. Hi, Katie. Nice to see you too. I know you know about this as well. It makes you get up in the middle of the night and go for a 20-mile run, Trish says. Yeah. I mean, we do crazy things to try to cope, right? So I can tell this is connecting with a lot of you. So I appreciate those of you showing up and sharing your experiences in these ways. Thank you so much. You never know who is out there listening and who you might be helping just by sharing your bit of experience. Yeah. And notice too that when we connect, you see me connecting with some of these ideas, it makes me laugh. That's very real. That laughter is about connection. It's about recognition. And that's part of the process. So again, if you're grieving or if you're dealing with loss, allow yourself to be wacko and laugh at the most ridiculous things. It's part of the healing process. It's nice to see you too, Trish. Thanks for being here. I'm going to get back on Words with Friends with you soon, by the way. I'm sorry I've deserted you, but I'm going to come back. So there is relief to the grief. You can get through it. So the next way I'm going to talk about this is ways to deal with it. And so we talked a little bit about humor and painting your house and taking 20-mile runs in the middle of the night. I certainly, when I was in the throes of my grief and loss, I was running and doing yoga like a mad person. It was one way that really helped me cope. I looked really good. I was like rocking. My body was awesome, even though my spirit was completely wounded. Another thing that I did was I jumped so hard into writing poetry, which is not something that I particularly had done in the past or keep up really much now. I jumped really, really hard into writing poetry. And I had a couple of people in my life who were really appreciative of that. And they responded really well to that. And I actually started a regular practice on Facebook for a while where I had Poetry Tuesdays. Hello, K-Slay85. And I got to share that passion of poetry with my community. And many of whom were going through the same kind of loss that I was, or the same loss specifically, who knew my husband Peter and were missing him. And it was wonderful to be able to connect on that level, on a different level than just the emotional grief, but also I'm going to channel that energy into something that felt productive and creative. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about the veil between the spiritual life here and the next life becomes less concrete when we go through certain experiences like this. That was my experience for sure. I'm going to, again, speak from my own experience. When I was in the throes of grief and loss, I felt very supported and connected to those that I had lost. I felt like Peter was in my ear all the time, talking me through my day, walking me through the different emotions and the different experiences. He was there all the time, constantly. I talked to him out loud all the time. And I did for years after that. I still sometimes do. And he shows up in certain ways in my life where I know for me, that's true. The experience is that he's directing some connection, some message. And I know that can be true for a lot of you too. I know, Holly, I know you talk about cardinals, which is a big symbol for a lot of people. And that was one for our dad. Another way to deal with the grief is to connect to those messages. Allow that veil to be lifted, or at least fuzzy for a while. Allow yourself to live in the place where it's okay to connect with those that you've lost. And it may sound crazy to some people. It may sound, oh, you're talking to ghosts or spirit. It doesn't matter. It's your process. It's your experience. Embrace that experience. However it comes to you. For me, it came in not auditory per se, but it came in messages. I just could constantly sort of hear the support in my head of, you've got this, you're doing great. I would ask a question, I would get the answer. I'm proud of you. From my dad too, to a lesser extent. And my grandfather mostly comes in business messages to me, which is really fascinating. Usually around the intuition and building relationships in business and taking bold moves. That's where my grandfather shows up. For Peter, it's about family. For my dad, it's about parenting, and some about taking big risks and living life to the fullest. Those are the messages I get from them. Allow yourself to live in those connections. You still have the connections. The relationships are still real for you. And I'm not here to talk about science or metaphysics necessarily. I'm here to talk about what's real for you. So embrace those connections. Another thing that I think that I really pushed against was finding support and help. And like I mentioned earlier, I got to that point where I was standing outside my front steps and I could not bear. By the way, my kids were inside with a sitter when that happened. So I was looking at going through the front door and having to show up as a parent. And that's the moment where I said, I just don't have it in me. I can't do it. And so my friend Maria came over and she dealt with the babysitter. She got me situated. She got the kids all situated and transitioned. And they were little. They were 3 and 3 and 7 at the time. Dad shows I'm a perfectionism for you, Holly. That's totally right. I love that. That's a great. I'm looking over here at my comments from Facebook over here. And she's saying that he's showing up when she's painting her house in the walls and that it doesn't matter when she makes a mistake. But then he whispers in her ear that I will always see it even if no one else does, which is so dad. That's awesome. Asking for help. Yeah. It's so huge. It's so critical. And I'm going to recommend to you that you don't wait the way I did until you get knocked on your ass to wait for help. It's too much. It's too late. It's not too late. I'll take that back. You don't have to wait that long. You may not know what kind of help you need. And in my case too, I had many, many angels. One of whom was my sister. Another of whom was my very dearest friend in the world, Jenny, who saw the need and without me even asking, flew across the country twice, actually, in a row. And God bless her husband and her daughter who supported that as well. And she just showed up and she just absolutely carried me for the better part of a month and a half. And the kids. I was really, really lucky to have somebody who did that without me even asking. Now, I think the first time I asked, the second time she just came. It was a little bit magic, actually, too. She was like, here's an avocado because you're not eating. Or here's a glass of wine because I know you need to chill. Or here's your cup of coffee because you need to be alert. And I didn't even have to, she just anticipated my every need. It was just magical. If you're lucky enough to have a Jenny in your life, I highly recommend it. If you aren't, or if you don't think that you are, if you aren't aware of it, put out the call for help. Even if you say, I don't know what kind of help I need, but please, who can be on my team? There's a different Maria friend that I called when Peter first got his diagnosis. And I said, I need someone to be my scaffolding. I don't know what I need right now, but can you be my scaffolding? And again, I'm not telling you this because I know the ways to get through it. I was a hot freaking mess, you guys. I was a hot mess. And those who are closest to me in physical proximity will tell you what a hot mess I was. So again, this is not me coming from, I can tell you the way to do it. I'm telling you to learn from my mistakes and learn from the things that I know that ultimately I can see in hindsight now help me out. Jenny is a wonder. She is. Yeah. And I was lucky to have you too, Holly. I was going to say, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's more than that. It's not even about fear. You need it, period, the end. You need it. Whether you think you do or not, you need the help. Ask for it, even if it's vague. Put it out to the world. I need help. Who can help me? There will be people who will show up and help you. And if there aren't, I can help you with some resources to connect you with resources. I can do that so that you can find people who will help you, even if it's connecting with an online community in the middle of the night. So reach out to me if you need help with that. In terms of leading your people while you're dealing with grief, or where they are, or it's a collective, the number one tip I can give you is be human first. And we've learned a lot about that in the last 9 months. I know a lot of us have. Be human. We're all dealing with incredible trials right now. Every single one of us. If someone falls apart for a while, do your best to give them some leeway with some structure, with some guidance. We don't want people to completely lose their sense of purpose. And sometimes if we give them too much leeway, they'll get lost. So structure, form, and some freedom within that form. Ask them what they need. If they say, I don't know what I need, say, okay, when you know, let me know, I'll be here. Or open that conduit of relationship as a leader. It's the most important that you can do when somebody you're leading is going through loss and grief. Be human first. And that goes for yourself too. Be gentle with yourselves and be gentle with each other. And the last thing I want to address here is the strength, the resilience, and the perspective that comes with walking through grief and loss. There's a Japanese practice, and the name escapes me at the moment, and I apologize, but there's a Japanese practice that has to do with adding gold to something that is broken, because in the breaking of it and the mending of it, it adds beauty to the object. I think it's called kintsugi, but I don't mean to butcher that word. I'm going to look it up, and I'll put it in the comments later. When we break and when we mend, we are stronger. We are more beautiful. We are richer with experience. We have perspective that lends itself to wisdom, that lends itself to more empathy for each other. Another friend of mine who's a widow, she was a colleague of somebody, a coworker that I have, and she and I weren't particularly close friends, but we were friendly. And she said to me, she was a few years out when this happened in my life, and she said to me, "Do you think it's made you more sympathetic to other people's problems or less?" And I said, yes. I am more sympathetic to other people's big life-changing problems and less sympathetic, at least I was at the time, to people who have what I was judging as petty concerns. I changed that perspective a little bit. Grief, loss, stress, anxiety, pressures are relative. There's no one that has the right to say that my stresses are bigger than yours. They're relative. We all experience stress in a different way, at different times, and for different reasons. The perspective that I have gained, however, lets me understand that when somebody is in crisis, they can get through it. And when I am in crisis, I can get through it. And when my kids feel crisis, I can be there to help them get through it. And my clients are in crisis, I can hold space for them to help them get through it. It's the perspective of looking over the edge of the abyss and thinking, I could step over. And I'd be justified in stepping over. And I did. I thought that. I'm being real honest here. There was definitely suicidal ideation I was dealing with at the time. I was so overwhelmed, you guys. I was so broken. And I looked over the abyss. And because of the support I had from my friends, because of the connection I had with the people who left and who were pulling me back. I made the choice, and because of my kids, because I knew I needed to show up for them, even though it was incredibly hard at the time, not because of them, but because of me. I stepped back from the edge and I made the decision I can look over the edge sometimes and I can see it. And I also know that I have the strength and the experience to step back and go, yep, the option is there to go down the rabbit hole of grief and loss. And I know I can do that and come back from it. I also know that I can turn away from it. I don't have to go down the rabbit hole every time there's a stressor. And that's a muscle that I've learned to exercise over time through therapy, through energy work, through coaching, through living. None of us does this alone. You are not alone. The work is yours to do. You do not have to do the work alone. All right. So I hope that it was helpful. I hope that was useful. Thank you so much for Kintsugi. Thank you, Jonathan. Yes. Thanks for putting that in the comments there. Kintsugi is the Japanese art. Yoga, absolutely, Holly. I did yoga like a mad person. I was like, I'm telling you, I was in the best shape of my life. for whatever reason, I was a rockin' bod when I was 35, 36 years old and going through the throes of widowhood. Yeah, yoga is key as well. Super healing on so many levels. We talked about grief and loss today. We talked about the impact it can have in your life. We talked about ways to deal with it, and we talked about how it'll change you. In the last couple of minutes here, I would love to hear how it's changed you, how you're going through it right now, how it's changing you right now. What awareness do you have about that? My sister says she looks awesome too. Yeah, you always look awesome, whatever. But right, it does. There's a motivator there to just heal the soul. How is it changing you, y'all? Drop it in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on grief and loss. I'd love to hear from 2 or 3 of you. How is it changing you? Anybody have anything else to add before I sign off? I'm going to sign off in a minute here. Again, remember, grief and loss are the most profound experiences we can have, or among the most profound experiences we can have. They are among the most intense emotional experiences that we are gifted with in this life. There is purpose behind it, whether you see it or not. It's up to you to find the purpose for yourself. It's up to you to do the work. You don't need to do it alone. Connect with people who can help. Get your pride out of the way. It has no place here. The pride and ego have no place here. Connect with people. Ask for help. You will find your way out. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. It's been 30 minutes. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to talking to you more soon. I'm going to take next week off, as it being Christmas. I'm going to take that week off. I will definitely be posting between now and then, and I may be posting some video clips throughout the next week or my next 2 weeks. I'll come back and join you in 2 weeks. More compassion. I hear my sister say, Dorothy says, letting yourself grieve makes space for new possibilities. Absolutely, Dorothy, 100%. Great insight there. And Christina says it's deepened her understanding of her life, both the loss of her mom to brain cancer 10 years ago. Brain cancer, man, is a and marriage 5 years ago. Relationship loss too. Absolutely. We're not talking about life and death. We're talking about whatever grief you're going through. Thank you for bringing that up, Christina. Huge loss and heartbreak and grief, right? And yet, as Dorothy says, that it makes room for new possibilities, right? If part of the breaking is breaking open. And Trish says she was a hot mess too with grief and realized that she can always ask for help. Yeah. Thank you all for joining me today. It was wonderful to connect with you. If you're going through grief and loss right now, you are not alone. First of all, you have all the people here who understand what you're going through. You have me, and I guarantee you have people in your life who are willing to help you. Ask the universe, ask God, ask them for the help. and you'll see who shows up. I hope you have a beautiful holiday, and I will see you on the flip side. 2 weeks. Take care, everybody. Bye.